Deep thinking, a different way to see yourself. Do you remember what you read? Scrolling used to feel like a small habit, something casual and harmless. Now it seems almost continuous, woven into the quiet spaces of daily life. Marshall McLuhan once wrote, "The medium is the message. We shape our tools, and thereafter our tools shape us." His observation suggests that the structure of a tool shapes the way we think. Information has not disappeared, but our way of staying with it may have quietly changed. Maybe the issue is not information itself, but the pace at which it arrives. First, scrolling shortens attention and thoughts, rarely settle long enough to deepen. Second, scrolling rewards reaction. There is always something to tap, like, or move past. And third, scrolling fragments context. Each idea appears briefly before being replaced by the next. Understanding becomes something we assume, rather than something we build. And perhaps that subtle shift says more about us than the content itself ever could. So now, what if you asked yourself, do I scroll to understand or simply to move on? When I say I saw it, did I actually stay long enough to think about it?
What would you honestly say? Let's keep going a little deeper.
Do I reward what I hate? We often speak confidently about our values. We say we care about fairness, honesty, and responsibility. But principles are not proven in statements. They are revealed in what we consistently support. Integrity is not a declaration, it is a pattern. What we reward, tolerate, or excuse quietly shapes the world around us. There is often a quiet gap between words and actions. The question is not what we criticize in theory, but what we sustain in practice. Maybe the issue is not open hypocrisy, but quiet inconsistency. First, we criticize behaviors in public that we benefit from in private. What we condemn in speech, we may still encourage through attention or approval. Second, convenience reshapes judgment. When something serves our interests, it becomes easier to excuse. And third, repetition dulls discomfort. The more often we accept small contradictions, the less noticeable they become. Over time, reward and criticism separate. We begin to oppose in theory what we sustain in practice. So now, what if you asked yourself, do my actions support what my words oppose? Have I quietly benefited from what I claim to reject?
What would you honestly say? Let's keep going a little deeper.
Is my kindness just a performance? Kindness is often praised as a visible virtue and easily recognized. Immanuel Kant once wrote, "An action is only truly moral when it is done from duty, not from inclination." His words suggest that goodness is not measured by appearance. It rests in intention and remains steady when no one is watching. When kindness seeks recognition, something within it subtly changes. And that change can reveal more about us than the act itself. Maybe the concern is not kindness itself, but the need for it to be seen. First, visibility can turn kindness into display. Acts once done quietly begin to seek acknowledgement. Second, repetition can normalize performance. What began as sincerity slowly adapts to expectation. And third, performance reshapes motivation. We may start helping not only to care, but also to be perceived as caring. And then, kindness becomes something we manage for impression, rather than something we practice with integrity. So now, what if you asked yourself, When I act kindly, would I still do so without recognition? And if no one noticed, would my intention remain the same?
What would you honestly say? Let's keep going a little deeper.
Where does my responsibility stop? Responsibility is rarely as clearly defined as we assume. In daily life, it often extends beyond what we expect. Hannah Arendt once observed, German-American philosopher 1906 to 1975. The sad truth is that most evil is done by people who never make up their minds to be good or evil. Her words suggest responsibility is not only about action, but also about remaining passive. And sometimes what we do not do shapes outcomes as much as what we do. Perhaps responsibility has become narrower than it should be. First, we reduce it to direct roles. If something is not assigned to us, we assume it is not ours. Second, we separate action from consequence. If we did not cause the problem, we feel little obligation to respond. And third, we draw invisible boundaries. We decide where our concern ends, even when impact continues beyond that line. Over time, responsibility becomes something we limit rather than examine. So now, what if you asked yourself, where does my responsibility truly end if the outcome still affects others? And when I choose not to act, what am I quietly allowing to continue?
What would you honestly say? Let's keep going a little deeper.
Do small promises really matter? Promises are often spoken lightly in everyday life. A quick "I will," a simple "later," or a casual agreement. In the moment, they seem small and easily forgotten. Yet over time, these small words begin to carry weight. They shape expectations, even when nothing is written down. What we say we will do creates a quiet agreement between people. And without noticing, these small promises begin to define how we are trusted. Perhaps we treat promises as smaller than they are. First, we separate words from actions. We say things without fully considering whether we will follow through. Second, we underestimate their impact. What feels minor to us may shape how others see us over time. And third, we delay without intention. We push commitments slightly forward, assuming it does not matter. Over time, promises lose clarity and weight, and trust begins to weaken in ways we rarely notice until it is too late. So now, what if you asked yourself, how often do I follow through on the small promises I make? Do my actions consistently match my promises?
What would you honestly say? Let's keep going a little deeper.
Why does trust break so easily? Trust rarely forms in a single moment. It builds slowly through small actions over time. A kept promise, a consistent response, a sense of reliability. These moments may seem ordinary on their own. Yet together, they begin to create confidence between people. We start to expect stability where there was once uncertainty. And without noticing, trust becomes something we rely on, as if it were always meant to be there. Perhaps trust is more fragile than we assume. First, it depends on consistency. Even small breaks can disrupt the pattern. Others have come to expect over time. Second, it carries hidden expectations. What we believe is understood may not be as clear or shared by others as we assume. And third, it changes quickly under pressure. A single moment can outweigh many quiet ones. Over time, trust is not only built through actions, but also reshaped by how those actions are remembered. So now, what if you asked yourself, what patterns of mine are others learning to trust? And how easily could those patterns be broken without me noticing?
What would you honestly say? Let's keep going a little deeper.
Fair or just favorable? Fairness often feels like a clear principle. We believe we want things to be just and balanced. When something seems unfair, we react quickly. But in everyday situations, the line becomes less certain. When outcomes affect us directly, our sense of fairness can shift. What feels fair in general may feel different when it becomes personal. And without noticing, we begin to favor results that benefit us while still believing we are fair. Perhaps our sense of fairness is not as neutral as we assume. First, perspective shapes judgment. What feels fair often depends on where we stand in the situation. Second, outcome influences belief. We tend to accept decisions that benefit us more easily than those that do not. And third, self-interest hides quietly. We adjust our standards without fully recognizing this shift. Over time, fairness becomes less about principle and more about what feels acceptable to us. So now, what if you asked yourself, do I want fairness or simply a result that favors me? And when something feels unfair, whose perspective am I using?
What would you honestly say? Let's keep going a little deeper.
Do I give respect first? Respect is often treated as something that must be earned over time. Confucius once said, "Respect yourself and others will respect you." His words suggest that respect does not begin with others. It begins with how we choose to carry ourselves in everyday situations. Yet in many situations, respect is withheld until it is proven. What could begin as mutual regard becomes conditional, shaped more by judgment than by openness. Perhaps the issue is not respect itself, but how we decide when to offer it. First, respect becomes transactional. We wait for others to meet certain standards before extending basic regard. Second, hesitation replaces openness. Without initial respect, interactions begin with distance rather than trust, making genuine connection harder to form. And third, judgment comes first. We assess before we acknowledge, often forming conclusions too quickly. Over time, respect turns into something negotiated, instead of something that sets the tone from the beginning. So now, what if you asked yourself, do I wait for respect to be earned before I offer it? Or do I begin with respect, regardless of what I receive?
What would you honestly say? Let's keep going a little deeper.
Am I caring or interfering? Care is often seen as a sign of concern and responsibility. Khalil Gibran once wrote, "Let there be spaces in your togetherness." His words suggest that care does not require constant involvement. It respects distance as much as closeness in relationships. Yet in relationships, care can quietly extend beyond its place. What begins as support may become intrusion, and concern can slowly turn into control, without being fully recognized. Perhaps the issue is not care itself, but how it is expressed and perceived. First, help overrides autonomy. We step in too quickly, assuming others need our involvement. Second, intention masks impact. What is meant as support may feel limiting or intrusive to others. And third, closeness blurs boundaries. The more we care, the harder it becomes to recognize where we should stop. Care becomes something imposed, often without being fully noticed. And we may no longer recognize where support ends and control begins. So now, what if you asked yourself, when I try to help, am I respecting the other person's space? Am I offering support or taking control without realizing it?
What would you honestly say? Let's keep going a little deeper. If you took a moment to reflect, that's already enough. See you in the next one.